Well, every day here on Front Row Tampa Bay all this week, just about this time, lunchtime, we hope you'll join us for lunch because this is going to be a roundtable discussion, a little more in-depth conversation about some of the business topics that are affecting us all today. And let's all have lunch together every day about this time. Heather, you can come back, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joining us today, we're going to talk about the role that entrepreneurs play in our economy and the challenges and the benefits and risks and reward of being a startup business here in our area. Joining us today, Garrett Johnson. Good to have you here. Garrett is the co-founder of SendHub. Heather Kenyon is the CEO of the Tampa Bay Technology Forum, right here. Representative Jamie Grant is also dual purposes. He's also with LifeSync Technologies, and also Jordan Raynor. I'm sorry, that was Representative Grant right there, and Jordan Raynor joins us, digital strategist who has spent his career using technology to solve problems in government and politics. And we welcome all of you today to talk about building a business in Tampa Bay. I'm going to start with you, Garrett, because I'm interested in this whole SendHub idea. First of all, tell us what it is.
Sure. So SendHub focuses on communication for businesses and organizations. We make it really easy for any small business to ditch their landline and to use SendHub as a tool to communicate over SMS, social, and voice. So we have lots of entrepreneurs who are just getting started. The concept of going to Verizon, spending weeks to process that and pay the money to get a landline, they're coming to us using the cell phone that they have in their pocket 15 hours a day, adding an extra line and doing everything that they need to communicate with their customers.
And so it's interesting how you came up with the idea for this.
Yeah. So small business is what we focus on now, but the original idea was to help my nephew's school in East Tampa communicate more effectively with parents and students, many of whom don't have computers in their home.
But they all have cell phones.
But they all have cell phones.
They all
so,
text.
if you're trying to communicate with a 15-year-old who has never sent an email, doesn't have an active email account, there's going to be a massive disconnect. And then when you think about the socioeconomic issues of families who are disadvantaged, email is just not going to work, but everyone has a cell phone.
So you saw a problem and you solved it. And this is the result.
Well, this was intended to be a side project. I was headed off to law school in August of last year. But this SendHub project took off and has become a full-time business. We have 13 full-time employees. We've raised a lot of money and have a lot of users. So we're really excited about the progress that we've made.
Jamie, let's go to you. LifeSync Technologies, you're in a similar situation.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm jealous of Garrett because the entrepreneurial bug hit me after I graduated from law school rather than on my way. So I think I could have sped up this process a little bit. But yeah, so we created LifeSync with the vision of creating technology that makes people's lives easier. And one of the things that we do internally is develop applications focused on different industries that we've kind of targeted to say, how can we make this process better? And I think it's the exciting thing about being in technology and being an entrepreneur today is it really is becoming kind of the next generation of manufacturing. And so when you talk about Garrett and the idea of SendHub, I kind of laugh going to some of the conversations we've had in our office because there's so many times that we have a conversation about, what is really the problem and what are we trying to solve, and looking at how other companies have succeeded. Very rarely do we actually solve the problem we set out to solve, right? And we see that users start to manipulate and understand the technology in a different way. And so at LifeSync, we're in the process of launching our first application here in the next quarter or so called Blue Water. Blue Water is a way for patients and individuals and families to control critical and sensitive information in a way that isn't currently available. And so hopefully it leads to that empowerment in healthcare in this country, finally giving consumers and families and individuals the ability to own that information and to revolutionize the way we get care and the way we communicate with others around sensitive data.
Okay, Jordan, Citinvest.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I say that correctly,
You
Jordan?
did. You're one of the
Citinvest. Okay, tell me, that's a great name.
Thank you. Yeah, so not only are Jamie and I co-founders together at LifeSync Technologies, but I'm also co-founder of a company based here in Tampa called Citinvest. Citinvest is a crowdfunding platform for local government projects. So we looked out there and we saw in the marketplace sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo who've gained massive popularity in raising money for creative projects. And we asked ourselves, can this model be used to fix the problem of local governments who are broke all across the country?
Okay, so explain to people who don't know what Kickstarter
Sure.
and all those, you're talking about sort of a grassroots effort
Yeah.
to use technology to ask people to help us fund something.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So I'll put it in the context of Citinvest. So we work with cities. We're currently working with the city of Tampa to identify projects that the city has already approved. They know exactly how much it's going to cost. The only thing lacking is funding. And some of these projects citizens want to see happen today. To make it really local, the pool at Davis Island, for example, has needed renovations for years, and the city just doesn't have the money in the budget. So the citizens came together and said, okay, well, we're going to raise it ourselves. We're going to have neighborhood barbecues. We're going to go door to door with an envelope and physically carry cash. We looked at that and said, that's not efficient or scalable. So we've kind of taken that, right? So we've taken that model, put it online, and the way it works is citizens pledge to invest in the projects that they care about most, but they only get charged if a project reaches 100% of its funding goal. So there's no risk to citizens for investing in these projects, and there's no risk to the government entities because they don't have to build a project unless they get the necessary funds.
You know, what a great idea, because you hear people talking about wanting to save the Friendship Bridge, for instance, then they could raise their own money and do it. What
Absolutely.
a great idea.
Absolutely.
Heather, Tampa Bay Technology Forum.
Yes.
That fits right into this.
Oh, it
What do you-
does.
yeah.
And I tell you, this is why I have the best job in the universe, because you have great people like this. They're really intelligent and smart. I get to talk to great, fun people all day long. So it's a very cool job. And great ideas, too, by the way. That's awesome. But,
All of them are.
They are. That's great. And that entrepreneurial spirit is so wonderful and great in this town and in Tampa. And I think it's wonderful that we can showcase companies like this of people that are doing some really innovative, interesting things. The Tampa Bay Technology Forum is a membership organization for technology companies. So we have over 300 member companies that are like two guys in a garage, right? All the way up to...
Aren't they all?
Yeah, they all are. It's a nice garage. It's, exactly, and Red Bull everywhere. But so the two guys in a garage all the way up to Tech Data and Jabil. And by the way, Jabil was a startup. They started here and or actually moved here, but expanded
started
here.
in-
Yeah, you want to talk about entrepreneurial spirit, alive and well here. Companies like Outback, so we've got these entrepreneurial companies, but then the larger ones, Pods, Jabil, Tech Data, all these great companies, and people aren't necessarily aware of the great companies and industry and businesses that are here. So I'm so glad you guys are here to talk about, the cool factor that Tampa has, and maybe someone in other areas may not be aware of. So
Now, Garrett, you started this here with your nephew at a local Tampa school. Then you had to go out to Silicon Valley to get some funding, but you really would like to come back here. So talk a little bit about, all of you, about the ideas of having to fund these startups, the challenges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that,
It just got serious.
talking about money. Yeah. I think that is the #1 challenge of any startup, is finding access to capital. And it's not a Florida unique or a Tampa Bay unique problem. It's a problem across the country, and I dare say around the world. We were able to get accepted to this program called Y Combinator that offered us a few $100,000 and incredible network and mentorship to come out to Silicon Valley for 3 months and to get our company off the ground. And so it was an offer we just couldn't refuse.
Couldn't turn it down.
Yeah, and so I think there are ways, even in the absence of that level of capital, for Florida to leverage so many other things that we have going for us. No income tax, very, business-friendly tax base, great weather, great universities, great environment that is business-friendly. So if we can pool our resources in a, coordinated way to offer startups either, short periods of time where they can come to Florida and share information and share knowledge, and then maybe go back to wherever they are, sort of like a study abroad program, or long-term incentives for them to start their company here. I think it can be an important addition into our economic development plan, as opposed to just going after well-established companies and trying to get them to relocate to Tampa.
Yeah, and Jordan, you said you'd kind of like to speak to that also, that there are challenges to finding the money to fund these startups.
Yeah, it's tough. There's no shortage of venture capitalists in Tampa, but there is a shortage of seed stage and early stage venture capitalists to really help get these companies off the ground. I just spent a week with my co-founder Tony DeSisto on Citinvest out in San Francisco, trying to raise seed stage capital, because frankly it's really tough to come by here. That said, though, once you do have your seed money, I think it's easy to raise subsequent rounds here in the Tampa Bay area. I think what we've done with LifeSync is kind of unique in raising capital. I don't know if Jamie wants to speak to that, but it's kind of a unique take to raising early stage capital here in Florida.
Yeah, so that's really one of the big challenges, and Garrett talks about kind of going to a place where Y Combinator is kind of as good as it gets as far as that model. And so not kind of having access to that and being in a situation where because of wearing two hats, I didn't have the opportunity to apply to a Y Combinator or a Code for America that Citinvest was a finalist for to be able to do that. And so we started looking at how do we raise that kind of early seed funding. And it really just kind of was it was something that was brought to us and really a blessing. But in talking through the product and the project with some folks affiliated with the insurance company, they said, hey, or with the insurance industry, they said, hey, would you be interested in putting jobs here in a rural county in Tampa Bay? And we said, well, it depends. And so they started talking to us. And it turns out that we actually do have kind of a really interesting network of economic development going on in the state of Florida. I think that the biggest challenge is that you have these economic development boards or private groups of really private capital that is a totally different model to seed funding, kind of butting heads with communities that don't want or don't understand technology. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges as young entrepreneurs in the state of Florida is that, if you're in California, regardless of what industry you're in, you're used to seeing people our age start successful companies and exit or acquire other successful companies. And so that's still something that I think we're seeing here in Tampa. To Jordan's point, it's very easy to start a round B here. It's very difficult to get the seed funding in the round A. And so that's one of the challenges. Fortunately for us, Hardee County has been a tremendous partner. It's kind of our goal that when we look at the technology park and the rural the unique assets they have for a rural county, they're 2 miles off of dark fiber, which obviously is kind of rare, and then directly on the ILA POP. So there's a lot that's attractive about starting a startup there if we can kind of get off the ground and creating a technology hub down there that hopefully becomes a template for public-private partnerships and economic development around the state to be able to say that, hey, look, there's challenges. I don't know that there's a right way or a wrong way. There's some days I wake up and say, man, I wish we would have gone the traditional VC route because, you get called names and whatever you can imagine by people in the community. But then there's a lot of days where you sit back and you say, man, there's something really altruistic and there's something really emotional about being able to sell this story where kids right now in Hardee High School will be able to stay in Hardee and get a job in technology. And right now that's not a choice, right? They either leave Hardee County and maybe the state of Florida or they don't take a job in technology. And so seeing that environment in kind of Tampa Bay as a whole, it's very interesting for us to have, kind of being based in Tampa but having operations in Hardee to see a very big difference between those two has really been kind of an interesting process for us as a startup.
And Heather, the other piece here besides the challenge of raising money for the initial investment is the talent pool,
right,
and looking for young people coming out of college, coming out of high school, trained to do these IT positions.
Well, it's a great point, and I think, kind of to your point, I think, Florida has just had some traditional, industries, right? It hasn't necessarily been technology-based. So even for that early stage capital, these are people who haven't been technology entrepreneurs. They've done real estate or something along those lines. So technology isn't necessarily something that they understand. However, technology is not just startups, it's everywhere. I mean, it's every single company from Outback, Raymond James. I mean, it's pervasive, right? And we're only increasing the use of technology, not reducing it. So my challenge as a CEO of the TBTF is that as I said before, we've got little guys and then we've got the biggest guys. Well, the thing that binds them all is they can't find the talent on the IT side. Everybody's looking for talent. I can look at every single company within our membership and they're looking for at least 1 to 50 IT workers that they can't find.
So there is a huge job market, and job openings,
yes,
if you could find the right people. That's amazing.
So what we're doing right now, and actually when you talk about that partnership, we're working with like the Hillsborough County EDC, Pinellas County EDC, the Tampa Bay Partnership, the Florida High Tech Corridor, to put together an analysis of the jobs that are needed. And then once we have that data, we're going to go to the universities and all the other people and say, listen, and industry, and say, listen, you guys need to work with us. You need to, universities need to work with industry to actually employ interns so they stay here and they know about the great jobs that are here, because that's the other issue. People don't necessarily know about all the great companies that are here. They think of Microsoft and Google and Adobe. They don't think about TriBridge. They don't think about Catalina Marketing or SendHub for that matter, unfortunately. So we want to, spread the word about the great companies that are here.
And so you're in a unique position, Jamie, to try to pull in the government and the public into helping to fund in those partnerships. So you're in a great position.
It got serious
to
again. Round two.
Would you rather talk about how they dress in Silicon Valley walking in for a job interview than here?
Yeah.
I bet it's different, isn't it? How is it different?
Yeah, I mean, I wear shorts and T-shirts every day. You know, suits are an anomaly in Silicon Valley.
So shorts and T-shirts in Silicon Valley, Tampa Bay, you have to
Suits.
put on the tie.
Suits and a tie.
Yeah, we
Isn't
were
that
talking about
funny?
this last night actually with a good friend of ours that's also very active in the social kind of social media forum, but communications and digital space. And I was joking with him that I think you're kind of starting to see this trend, and it'll hopefully eventually become pervasive here. That when we were growing up,
Your elders were not like this.
right? No, my dad is cringing somewhere right now, and I absolutely love it. But when I was growing up as a kid, it was always kind of, you know, you walk downtown or West Shore, and the successful businessmen were in, you know, buttoned up to the nine with their, and I certainly believe there's a time and a place for that. But, you know, I mean, in our office, we're very rarely, I mean, this is about as dressed up as I get if I'm in this role.
Do
And
you
so,
even own a tie?
yeah, I do.
Maybe for Tallahassee.
I do. Yeah, so, and that whole legal career thing. So I still have some, we joke that I'm a recovering attorney.
Here comes the lawyer.
Going
Got a
on
tie
like 9 months sober, so it's great. But no, it's great. So to your original question, Kathy, I think there's a tremendous opportunity, and certainly as an entrepreneur in the space, I have to be very careful about you know, doing anything that appears to be a conflict or something that benefits our companies. But I think our company is a fantastic example of really the challenges that you're seeing in Florida. And I think one of the real I think kind of spark plugs that has to be ignited for technology to really take off in Florida. And just a great example, we actually, Jordan and I went to the same elementary school several years apart, and I have an in-law.
Rival high school.
That went, but Garrett and I had not met till this morning, right? And so, and Jordan and I hadn't really met until about 3 years ago. And so, think of really how close, just kind of one connection away, you have these technology entrepreneurs in the city, and it's very difficult to kind of connect and understand and network and say, hey, Garrett, I can help you here with this introduction or this challenge you're having, and so how do we do that? And so once that kind of happens, I think you'll see that kind of push government. To your ultimate question is, government in Florida right now still doesn't get it. We still don't understand. We still don't have a technology committee anywhere in the entire legislature.
So you really need to pull them in some way. They have a role to play.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've really been advocating, and I hope we'll see in the near future, is actually a technology committee inside the legislature. And so, right. So,
well, I think when the legislature or maybe an older generation thinks of a startup, they think of a lemonade stand, not Twitter and Facebook.
Right.
Yes, you're right.
And so we have to really shift that paradigm for people to understand that, you know, there is a potential for that to be created here, and those jobs to be created here in Florida, and specifically here in Tampa Bay. And so I think that we can't just start in the legislature, we can't just start with universities, but we really have to educate communities and educate investors here to know that there is that deal flow in the technology space that's not real estate, that's not orange groves, but in this economy has a lot of potential. And then to the point of training our base, our workforce, I think we really have to start in high school as well and middle school with STEM. I mean, you think of Zuckerberg, you think of Bill Gates, they are anomalies for sure, but they are both college dropouts. I mean, we would hire a programmer right now who did not have a college degree if he or she could get the work done, and we would pay them well, $60,000 to $80,000 to start. And so, you know, people who are, you know, in rough neighborhoods where I grew up in East Tampa, there's a program called Computer Mentors that's doing phenomenal work to try and train young inner city students in technology, to give them the options to become programmers, to become engineers, so that they have a bright future in addition to or, you know, away from their traditional university work.
You know, Heather, this is almost like communicating with a different language, almost with a different generation.
It is, and it's actually, you know, the cool factor, right? So Bob Trudeau talked about that, like, is Tampa lacking the cool factor? And I think to a certain extent we are. I mean, you know, if you take a look at New York and Boston and California, are they saying Tampa? Woo, no, but we have amazing stuff here. I think there is I think, you know, you sort of have to do that PR and marketing campaign and almost to get the word out about the great opportunities that are here. And that it's not just the traditional industries, but there are great technology companies there, right?
I think you're right, but I also think that's changing. I think we've seen a pretty dramatic shift over the last couple of years. You know, there's been a lot of really interesting startups, really interesting projects that have come out of Tampa. Woofu is a great example of that, and a nice little exit for those guys that gave Tampa kind of a bigger name in this space.
Okay,
but
what
also,
is that? what is Woofu?
See, right?
Marketing.
Sorry.
Right,
There
exactly.
is a marketing
it's a
component
PR
to this.
challenge.
Yes.
So Woofu was a form builder company that sold to SurveyMonkey. Is that correct?
And they got Y Combinator funding as well.
Right. So really interesting. But
Anybody over 35, we'll have a little test out.
you know, I think
Woofu, we got
exactly.
SurveyMonkey.
I think organizations like the Technology Forum, organizations like Tampa Bay Wave are really helping to lay the groundwork of a network of professionals here who are connected and who are talking about really interesting projects. Few people know that in 2010, the Foursquare I Voted project, so when you checked in your polling place location and you got an I Voted badge, that was started here in Tampa by me and a very small team, right? So there's little projects like that that are happening constantly that I think are starting to build Tampa as a pretty significant tech brand. And thankfully, we have a lot of political leadership in this space. Mayor Buckhorn, I think, is one of the most innovative mayors in the country. You know, Mark Sharp on the Hillsborough County Commission is an innovator. I think one of the most effective politicians who uses Twitter. No offense, Jamie. But you know, we have political leadership. We have institutional support like the Tampa Bay Technology Forum, and we have great success stories. And frankly, this is a great place to live if you're a young entrepreneur. It's very cheap compared to the rest of the United States. We have the best airport in the world, so if you love to travel like my wife and I do, it's a fantastic place to be. You know, it's becoming, I believe, I think in a few years we'll see Tampa synonymous with the Boulders of the world, with the Austins of the world in terms of a technology community.
But I think to Heather's point, because I completely agree with what Jordan's saying, and I was talking to somebody the other day in kind of my legislative role, but it was a very successful CEO of a large company, not in the technology space, but yeah, I know. And so I was talking with he and one of his associates, and she had said to me, we have manufacturing and distribution plants, and she listed 12 locations, and none of them were in the southeast. The closest was North Carolina. I said, what do we have to do to get you to Florida? And she said, well, ask him. And so I asked him, I said, what do we have to do to get you to Florida? And he said, you can. And I said, what do you mean you can? And there were certainly some specific business challenges with his business, but it brought up the notion of this New York commercial with Robert De Niro. I don't know if everybody's seen it, but it is, to me, the greatest and most effective advocacy for a region that I've ever seen, for a region that has a top tax rate of as high as 60%, that has cold winters, that income tax. I mean, go down the list of what we have in Florida that New York doesn't, and they're running commercials in our backyard saying, we are innovators, we will lead the next generation. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to work together to be able to tell that story, because I absolutely agree that you're seeing the talent come together, you're seeing the network. I think one of the exciting things about technology is you really have the ability for multiple success stories. There's not a lot of competition, right? It's the ability to look at something like SendHub and innovate and iterate on top of, to create a business on top of that. And so when I talk about government getting involved in the process and the lack of a technology committee, we don't keep a single electronic record on a child who goes into the Department of Juvenile Justice, who goes from DJJ into a correctional facility, into foster care, into the state prison system. We don't know what we immunized them with. We don't know what health conditions they had. We don't know any of these things. And we continue spending money. And so if government was to kind of take the lead and say, hey, this is a process we're going to start, imagine how many technology companies could iterate on top of it to create really sustainable and viable technology that doesn't just benefit government, that then moves into the private sector. And so that's my biggest push with government, is to say, get government involved in this, because it turns the real linchpins, Jordan, one of Jordan's favorite words, but it turns the linchpins loose to say, how do we create value on top of this technology and in conjunction with it, so that at some point you see SendHub and a LifeSync Technologies working kind of side by side on something that, and so that. Well,
I mean, Mayor Bloomberg tweeted in 2011 that his goal, his resolution for 2012 going into the new year was to learn to code. You know, here's a guy who is an eminent figure in the business world, and his pledge for 2012 is to use Code Academy to learn to code. So I think that there is a role in leadership capacity that government has to play. But, you know, I think that trying to fix sort of government typical roles of immigration, making it easier for people who come to USF, who come to University of Tampa from outside of the country to stay here and to create jobs. Just think about Google, Skype, YouTube, all founded or co-founded by a person who was not born in the U.S. Trying to deregulate the process so that startups are able to access RFPs and to compete with well-established, longer existing companies. I think that there has to be a shift, as you pointed out, leadership from the legislature and the Congress to try and move our country in that direction, to understand that technology and startups is the future, it's the present, and it will certainly be the future.
And keep the talent here.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Keep the talent here.
Yeah.
Can I, because it is the week of the convention,
Sure.
I want to ask briefly if you could talk about iVote, because I think that's kind of revolutionizing things too. So brag a little
Thanks.
about that.
So
like to think.
this is kind of an interesting story. So in 2010, I was sitting in my office and I was thinking about Election Day coming down. This is probably sometime in August, and I thought to myself, why isn't there a virtual version of the I voted sticker that we've gotten for decades when we go to vote, and to tell everyone that, hey, we were at our polling place location. So logically, Foursquare was gaining a lot of traction at the time, so I kind of had this idea of, well, when you check into a polling place location on Foursquare, you should be able to instantly share that, get a badge, a virtual badge that says that you
I voted,
and share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and they'll have known that you voted before you even get to the office,
That is
right?
so cool.
It's really powerful.
That is so cool.
But the big challenge was, so it was this is a great example of a huge technology problem. How do you map out 108,000 polling place locations for a one-day event? Foursquare wasn't going to spend the money to do that.
Right.
Fortunately, I'd been working with Google on a project called the Voting Information Project, where we were already doing this work, working with secretaries of state to open up their polling place location data, to put it in a universal format so that Foursquare and Facebook and whoever could build really interesting applications on top of that. I talk about a great example of government, taking government data and opening it up to the technology community to do really amazing things with it. So we did it. We put it together in literally a couple of weeks, bringing Google and Foursquare to the table. We did the badge. We did a big data visualization surrounding it. And the Voting Information Project is still going strong. Facebook this week announced in conjunction with CNN their I Voted hub to tell all your friends that you're going to vote. And a lot of that data is powered by the Voting Information Project.
Wow.
That is really cool.
There's so much brain
But
power.
that's a great example. Yeah, I mean,
People are so smart.
I think it's a great example when Jordan, that took kind of a community and a network and relationships, because Jordan sitting in his office couldn't just make that happen, right? You had to have all of these other components. And I think that's what we're finally starting to see in Tampa, and I think really pushing for is the ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do.
Right.
What relationships, what suggestions do you have as far as that technology to be able to integrate with that kind of stuff in a way that ultimately leads to something that everybody says, wow, that was amazing.
In Silicon Valley, there's this ethos that with enough energy shots, codes, and contacts, you can change the world. and I think that's right. Energy shots, code, and contacts can change the world.
Energy shots, you had a lot of those.
Oh, yes, yes,
so-
yes.
And we're
Okay,
gonna get
so,
that here in Tampa.
okay, one last question, and then I got to wrap it up. Does your nephew think you're famous now?
My nephew still gives me more hassle than anybody. but he has on his Facebook page, SendHub Junior CEO. So I hope that he knows that he can start a company, and little kids in inner city communities around the country, know they can start a company as well.
All right, Garrett Johnson, thank you.
awesome.
Heather Kenyon, Representative Jamie Grant, and Jordan Raynor, thank you all. Fascinating conversation. Thanks for having lunch with us. And coming up next, some major investors who want you to know that Tampa Bay is open for business.
You should get their car.